it's probably a good idea to discuss the practical processes of adding to the list. So there's several different ways that you can do it, and I'm going to take you through them now. So I think the key thing about nomination to the local heritage list is that it's designed to be easy. And it doesn't really matter how much information or expertise you have. So some people who nominate might be a really knowledgeable source on Cobb buildings, and they can tell us everything about that. But you might also just be here on holiday and you got interested in a site's history, and you thought it would be a good idea to bring it to our attention. And both of those we'd love to hear from. It's absolutely fine. Everybody can make a nomination from all walks of society and levels of interest, and that's definitely what we're looking for. So first of all, your first step on this exciting journey is to choose a way to nominate. The way you go about nominating is going to depend on how much you have to say about the asset and how many assets you have. I'll be talking you through different ways as the presentation progresses. There's also an aspect of personal preference. So for instance, I'm not a spreadsheet person, so I'm not going to choose the spreadsheet option, but I do enjoy playing with maps. So I'd look at Know Your Place and see if I can get my listing on that way. Once you've chosen, gather the information about the building or the place that you're going to nominate. And we'll go on to look at what that involves in just a minute. Then you just complete the entry and you send it off to us. We'll do the rest. We'll add it to the HER. That's Tom's job. He always aims to get it in on 6 weeks, but actually it doesn't take nearly that long. Get it done pretty much instantly. And if it is successful, once it's become a candidate, it will be added to the local heritage list. When it's on the HER, you can check its progress from candidate stage onwards. So what kind of information will you be asked to provide during the nomination process? There's a few things that it might be worth considering. Firstly, the practical step. Is it already listed? Is it already scheduled? And there are several ways to check this. The thing is, the local heritage list really only looks for buildings that aren't already on the national list. So it's good to let us know and just make sure that you're not nominating something that is already pointless or is already looked after. You can do this by going onto the HER, as Tom showed, or looking at Know Your Place, which we'll be talking about in just a second. Or you can go onto Historic England's website. They have a page where you can search the list and find out by address if the particular place you're looking at is listed. They have, I think they've recently redesigned it as well, so there's lots of interesting information to look at on there. Then we move on to more about the building itself. What are its noteworthy features, and does it meet our assessment criteria? Now, criteria, you can check these on our website, which is on the Southwest Heritage website, swheritage.org.uk. There's a brief outline there, and there's a link to a much more detailed version of the criteria, which you can look at if you're really keen. So the outline, it's not too technical, it's not tricky to understand or meant to be too prescriptive. There's always going to be a level of subjectiveness in how we interpret value, but it gives a good guideline about what we should be looking for and what you can tell us about. These criteria include things like age, rarity, and the building's historical associations, its social values. So I'll just talk briefly about this building that's on the slideshow. Paulet Balloon Hangar. It's just near Bridgewater. It's an extraordinary building. It's this 80-foot high corrugated iron shed dating from World War II. So you can see from that introduction, it's from World War II, so it has a bit of age value, but it is obviously not that old in comparison to, say, a medieval cottage. So if I nominated it, I probably wouldn't focus too much on that. but it does have really strong and fascinating historical associations. It was actually used to house barrage balloons during World War II when they were being tested, in order so the army didn't have to deflate them all every single night. They needed a really big shed that they could keep them in. So I think it's a really interesting part of the Somerset war industry and the war effort that took place in our county. As well as that historical association that I could mention, it's also a really rare building. There's only 2 examples of this that you can find. There's this one in Paulet and one in Sutton Coldfield near Birmingham. So it's quite an exceptional site and deserves recognition for that, I think. It's also under threat. It was refused national listing status in 2001, I think. And it's also pretty decayed. I was there fairly recently, and you can see that it is definitely neglected and at risk of slipping further into ruin and maybe demolition. So with that rarity, all those historical associations and the threat to it, I'd say it fits a lot of our criteria that you'll see. It only has to fit one. So even if it is only age value that you think is in a building, definitely consider it for the local heritage list. So yes, I'd recommend having a look through those criteria. They're on the website, and seeing what values and what criteria you think your choice of candidate represents. It's already been mentioned a few times in the presentations, but it has to be from Somerset and Exmoor and not North Somerset. There's a map that we've shown you there as well. It's worth noting, as I put in there, that it's a noteworthy feature is why the asset is locally important. And it's good to think about that local aspect because it is a key feature of the heritage list that we're doing. So the hangar, for instance, it does definitely link to the wider World War, but it's about Somerset's part in it. And that would be key to its place on the local heritage list. If you go around there, you talk to the community, they all know it. Just a cyclist passing by was very keen on it. And so you can see it has social value as well. Okay, now onto the practical business. Once we've gathered that information and had a good think about why a particular asset is valuable, how do I actually get it on the list? How do I get it to the Southwest Heritage Trust? Well, there's several ways of doing that. The first one is completing the nomination form. You can download this from our website. There's a page on there about nominations, and you can just scroll down and click download. Or you can email us at lhl@southwest or swheritage.org.uk, and we'll send you a copy of it. You can fill it out with all the details, giving us information both practical and more sort of reflective about this particular candidate. Add your files or pictures as an attachment and then email it back to us. We're always really keen to get PDF files, documents, and particularly images, which give us a good insight into the building beyond what words can tell us. And we obviously can't visit all of them, so it's great. We also ask you to say the copyright status, whether you have permission to share these images and who took them. So this form, it's not too long, and it kind of guides you through the different questions quite specifically. It's really good if you have one heritage asset that you want to nominate and provide lots of information about. You can complete more than one form, of course. Yeah, please do. We always welcome as much information as possible. Might be a bit cruel on Tom if we gave him sort of an 80-page document to upload, but whatever you know and can think is relevant, we're keen to hear. So I thought I'd talk through briefly what might be discussed on the form. Actually, I'm going to skip this slide for now, because it makes more sense to kind of compare this for the nomination spreadsheet. Now, this is an alternative way of adding your information, which is ideal if you have a lot of candidates to nominate, if you don't want to fill out a separate form for each one. it's been really useful, especially for local groups and societies and for parishes who've been able to kind of take it through, say, Minehead and just add all the different buildings that they know to be relevant there. You can also, just like the nomination form, you can download it on the website, and there's a guide next to that which you can have a look at, and it gives detailed suggestions for how to fill out each column. Now, this is the third way of nominating, and it's why I was looking at the picture of Bowring's Mill earlier. Know Your Place website. I'm talking to people in person and on social media. I know a lot of people have already tried this out for various reasons, which is great because it is a fantastic resource. In order to list on it, it's quite simple. You just navigate to the spot that you want to nominate on the map that comes up. You click that spot, complete a brief form, and you send it off. And it will be moderated and then put as a green dot on the community layer so that everyone else can see it. Now, it would be helpful at this point to have a demonstration, I think, because I know some people get a bit daunted when they first see it. I seem to remember I did. So I'll hopefully bring that up. Okay, with luck, you can all now see this browser with Know Your Place on it. If it's not up there, hopefully someone will holler at me. Forgive me while I turn to my other screen. So here we are on the opening landing page of Know Your Place. You'll see it puts you in Taunton, right over the Somerset Heritage Centre, Norton Fitzwarren. You can move around by clicking on the map and just dragging it. You'll notice also that you have two different maps here. There's a comparison map and a main map. And one of the great things you can do on Know Your Place is use the resource that it has of multiple different maps from different times across the last few hundred years in Somerset. And you can see the same place on different maps right next to each other. So for instance, let's have a look. If you click on base maps in the top right, here we have the main map, and this is set to the 2019 Ordnance Survey map. I'm going to keep this here for now because it's useful to have the modern one. If I click on comparison map, I can change this one. So I can go through all these different maps and see perhaps the 1840s tithe map. What was going on in the 1840s according to the tithe map, where the Somerset Heritage Centre is now? Not a huge amount as it happens. And then I can have fun and I could go to the 1888 one and I can drag that across too and see, well, we've got a railway now, so it's getting a bit more advanced. I'll stop playing with that now because I could go on forever. But that's basically the most exciting use of Know Your Place, that you can immediately do this comparison. But of course, you can also add something to the local heritage list. How best to go about this? First of all, I like to kind of clear the screen. So I'll click the middle here where the boundary between maps is and just drag it across. Now all I have is the 2019 map, and I would recommend using this for your heritage asset. I also click down at the bottom left with this annoying little bubble, Know Your Place. Then we get the full thing. If you want to get rid of this base maps information, click at the top right, this little 3 lines, and that will go away. Okay, so let me try with an example of that Bowring's Mill picture that I briefly showed you earlier. In order to get to the asset that you're looking for, click the little magnifying glass at the top left and type in the box. Now, I happen to know, as I tried it earlier, that Bowring's Mill, which is in Bridgewater, doesn't have an address that matches this map, but it does have a postcode. So I'll type that in now. And here we are. It's taken us straight to Bridgewater and straight to the Bridgewater docks. This is Bowring's Mill. We can zoom in on it by pressing the little plus here. And now that we've got here, we can have a quick look at the other fascinating source of information on Know Your Place, and that is these layers. If we go back to our menu box and click Information Layers, see lots of different ones that you can select. For instance, currently selected is the community layer, and that is that green dot here. If you click a lot of the green dots, they have various sort of public contributions on them, not usually related to the local heritage list. There's lots of really interesting artworks to do with churches, for instance, in the parish councils areas. So you can have a browse of that. You can also look at the historic environment records by clicking here. This will fill your screen with red. This is really useful to try out these different layers during your local listing process, because it allows you to see what catalogs the building or place that you're looking to list is already in. So if I zoom in a bit more, I can see the Bowerings Mill, also known as the Oil and Cake Mill, is already on the HER. Now, of course, something being on the HER is definitely not a problem when it comes to local listing. A lot of them will overlap. And as Tom showed, if something is locally listed, it will go on the HER. But that is a good source of information. So if you find something on the HEI layer, click this little arrow and it will take you to the entry for that record. So we have a community layer, we have a historic environment records layer. We also have a scheduled and listed buildings layer. These are really useful when you're checking out whether the building is already listed when you're making a nomination. So I can see here, I've put a check next to listed buildings. This building is listed. It can't go on the local heritage list, but the mill is not listed. That can stay there. We also now, excitingly, have a local heritage list layer to access. So you can click that, and I will make the confession that what I'm trying has already been put on the local heritage list. But there it is, and you can click it and get to that particular record. So we have our address and we have our different layers that we've used to find out that the mill is not already listed. Then all we have to do is select it. Go to the top right, click this little pencil. The pencil will turn orange. Then click on the mill. Little button will pop up saying create a new record here. Click that. And it will take you to this handsome form. So it's fairly straightforward to fill in. Just need to put in the name of the object, Bowerings Mill. The type of object, well, it's a factory and a mill, I think, if it's not already implied. Now, this is the really important box that you have to fill in. You can make it bigger by clicking on the right and going down. As it says, it's a description of the object, building, or feature, including the reasons why it is significant, any reference numbers, collection name, and source as appropriate, and or you can add an attachment below. So this is one I made earlier. This was submitted by someone to the local heritage list successfully, as we saw that this building is already on the list. And I won't go through it all in detail, but you can see that we have here written really some good detail about the physical proportions of the building and what it's actually made of, the bricks, when it was built and what it was used to do to produce animal feed. And there's also some really good contextualization of this building, some comments on its rarity. There's a fascinating chimney, sort of harlequin, multicolored next to the building. And it is, as this person has said, it's the last remaining of Bridgewater's industrial chimneys, of which there were once many. So this is kind of tapping into the criteria that we're looking at and thinking about the rarity of the building, which is a strong reason why it needs to be listed. Person continues by saying that it's a rare surviving example of Bridgewater's industrial heritage and it's a local landmark. These are really good things to point out. They link to the past of Bridgewater by talking about how it was part of Bridgewater's once thriving industrial economy. And they also established the importance of the building in its context, saying that it's an excellent example, reasonably intact, of few surviving structures that remain from Bridgewater's industries. As well as addressing that rarity and the importance of this building in the history of Bridgewater, they talk about the recent condition of it. There's been several fires at the mill, and they note that there was one in 2019, and an application followed by the owners to demolish it. And interestingly, local population and the town council were really against it, as this person says, and they fought the demolition plans. So it's still surviving to this day. So by mentioning that, we know a bit more about the history, and we also understand the building's historic importance, and what it means to the people locally, which is really useful for us to know. So of course, there's no need to tell us all this if you don't know this information, or you could tell us more if you have it, either in this box or on the nomination forms. But whatever you know, we're really glad to hear it. And if you can direct it to, well, as it says, the reasons why a building is significant, that will really help us when we assess the case. So now that that big question is over, there's just a few more things to address. You can leave your contact details on any of the forms. That's up to you. We have a privacy policy and we won't use any of them without your permission. In order to make your decision here, if you want your contact details to be recorded, you can click yes. Then you can fill out your name, your email address, and whatever organization. So for me, I guess that would probably be the Southwest Heritage Trust. It could be the Somerset Archaeological and Natural History Society as well. Do you have permission to publish this material? So yes, I'm happy for this to be published. Just pretend that I wrote it and it was that good. And any pictures that I'm going to upload, yes, I do have permission. I took them myself. Yeah. And you can add any resources. So for instance, I recall there's a really good article by the Bridgewater Heritage Group about the oil and cakes mill, Bowrings Mill. And it would be really useful if I was assessing this to have access to that. So just put in the resource link, the URL, and the title of it. And the last thing to fill in is really probably the most important one, the local heritage list nomination. You need to get that up and click yes. That means that it will be recorded as part of the local heritage list. Final thing you can do is upload any pictures, any PDF documents that are relevant to this listing, and we'll be really pleased to receive them and to look at them further. So yes, once you've done that, just click submit. I won't do it tonight because it will just double the work for everybody. But that will get sent off. It will be moderated just to make sure that it doesn't have any terribly rude words in it or anything, and then added to the HER and to Know Your Place. So that's looking at that way of nominating. Let me just get back to my PowerPoint slides. There we go. There is one last way of sending in your nomination. If you feel a bit overwhelmed by all these different options, or you don't have a huge amount that you want to tell us about, but you really think that this postbox is really cool, you can just send in a postcard. I designed one here and had a fun morning doing that, but any postcard will do. You need the building's name and address, obviously. And if you can, write any key features down that justify the listing and show us the building's or place's significance. Depending on your handwriting size, it will differ how much you can get onto the postcard, I suppose. But that would be brilliant. Yep, it needs a stamp, and then you send it to Local Heritage List, Somerset Heritage Centre, Brunel Way, Norton Fitzwarren, Taunton, TA2 6SF. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. If you want any more information, you can go to the website, swheritage.org.uk/local-heritage-list. It's also, there's linked to on the homepage as well at the moment. There's loads of stuff that you can look at there, and detailed guides, resources, many things that will entertain you for a long time. If you have any direct questions, email them to lhl@swheritage.org.uk or call the Southwest Heritage Trust's number. That's the Somerset Heritage Centre number. And if you ask for the local listing team, they will pass the message on. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that this has inspired you. It is a really interesting project, and it will be brilliant to see everyone involved submitting their nominations. As I've kind of tried to stress, there's a great amount of personalization possible in the listing process. So please don't feel stressed about how much you need to send in or whether you're going to get it right. What we want to do is just engage everyone in reflecting on their local heritage and pushing for its recognition as culturally valuable. So now I'm going to hand over back to Mary, and she will begin our Q&A to round off the webinar.